Well, good morning, everybody, and many thanks for the invitation to talk here today. Okay, so NICE is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence in England. Its jurisdiction is England rather than the whole of the UK. And it's been around for about 15 years now, and it's actually grown into a fairly large organisation. And the sort of things NICE does, it develops clinical guidelines which are all around sort of best practice in sort of the management of conditions. It also develops guidelines for public health interventions and more recently social care interventions as well. NICE is probably best known for its work on the assessment of pharmaceuticals, and the NICE assessment of pharmaceuticals is actually binding on the NHS. So whenever a pharmaceutical is recommended by NICE, then funding of that pharmaceutical is mandatory, and sometimes those decisions can be quite controversial, which is why we seem to find ourselves on the news and in the newspapers quite a lot. But I'm not talking about any of that today. I'm talking about our sort of work in the medical technologies areas, and I guess we've been really active in medical technologies for the past 5 years or so, and you know I think it's probably fair to say that as sort of health technology agencies around the patch go, we've probably been putting more focus on medical technologies than most in sort of recent times. So. In the sort of context of the sort of Swedish strategy of using UK as you know one of the early sort of markets, I'm hoping that some of this will be of interest to you. Okay, so I thought I'd start off with just thinking about the sort of things that that decision makers, not only NICE, but sort of decision makers who have to sort of make very difficult decisions on the use of healthcare resources, what they sort of need to know about a technology, and I think the starting point is, you know, are there going to be any benefits to patients? So is the technology going to result in an improvement in the patient's quality of life or the patient's length of life? So I think they're very, very important questions that need to be considered at a very early stage. Or alternatively, it could be that a technology isn't really going to result in particularly better outcomes for patients. But as long as they don't do any harm to patients, is there a way of using that technology to streamline the care pathway and result in sort of cost savings? So again, that's another very important dimension of value for medical devices and diagnostics. And I guess there's also a sort of more general, you know, how well does the technology tie in with sort of healthcare priorities in any particular jurisdiction? And I think all of these things sort of combine to form the value of the product. And as Ravi said earlier, we also would strongly support companies wanting to really think about these things at the very, very earliest stages of product development. Okay, now I mentioned that we've been doing quite a lot in the medical technologies areas, and I've just tried to summarise it in this one slide. So I think one thing we can offer is really very straightforward access to NICE to talk about sort of medical technologies. We have a program called the Medical Technologies Evaluation Program, and they actually have a section which is dedicated to engagement with industry. There's no fees for the very informal discussions at that stage. And you know, you're very, very welcome to make use of that facility. We can also support sort of evidence generation. Part of that is, you know, at the early stages, while sort of trials are still being planned, we can provide a nice scientific advice, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And also sometimes, you know, we get all the way through an evaluation, and the conclusion is that, yeah, very interesting and potentially important technology, but there really isn't quite enough evidence to recommend it right now for routine use. And that can result in research recommendations. But we do have some infrastructure in place to actually help facilitate that research rather than just making a research recommendation. Within NICE, medical technologies could be looked at by a number of different programs, and we have a number of different options based on the value proposition for the technology, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. But the sort of programs that could be involved would be our interventional procedures program, our medical technologies program, diagnostics program, or the technology appraisals program. And I guess also some of the medical technologies get incorporated into clinical guidelines as well. So there's a lot of nice activities where medical technologies can get considered. We also have a product called medtech innovation briefings, and this is a little bit different because this isn't actual guidance, so there's no recommendations in these briefings. What they are instead is just a sort of, a quality assured, standardized way of capturing the evidence that exists on products, and that can support organizations in making their own sort of commissioning decisions. And one thing we've heard a number of times is, you go through all this whole process, get guidance out the other end, but it still doesn't necessarily make it all happen. I acknowledge that. That's absolutely true. I think it helps an awful lot, though. And one thing we are doing is we have a program at NICE called the Health Technologies Adoption Program, and that's all about really driving the technologies recommended by NICE into clinical practice. And they've got very, the people in that program are very much, backgrounds on the sort of on the front line of healthcare delivery, and very much focusing on the sort of practical barriers to adoption. So there's quite a lot going on at NICE, which I think is relevant to moving forward health technologies. Okay, now I don't have time today to talk about the different sort of programs in any sort of detail, but I just wanted to sort of illustrate in this slide how the routing of topics at NICE to different programs is based on the potential value propositions of the technologies. So if the value proposition for a technology is, sorry guys, it's going to cost you more money, but it's going to really help patients, it's going to help people live longer and live better quality of life, then in those circumstances, there's not really any way of getting away from cost-effectiveness type methodologies. And some of you may be aware of the sort of the cost-effectiveness, the cost-utility metric that NICE uses, the quality-adjusted life year. And we use this sort of approach in our technology appraisals program, and we also use that approach in our diagnostics assessment program. So a medical device with that sort of value proposition would have to go through the technology appraisals program. A diagnostic with that sort of value proposition would have to go into the diagnostics program. But we also have another methodology based on sort of cost consequences, and this is a much simpler methodology, and it's also a lot quicker. And that works where the value proposition is that the product is clinically non-inferior, so there's good evidence to demonstrate that the product's at least as good as current standard care. But that it also can save some money by facilitating the re-engineering of the care pathway. It saves money overall, and therefore we don't need to worry about quantifying QALYs, we just need to know that it doesn't do any harm, and then we just need to understand the cost impacts throughout the whole care pathway. And of course we are looking at the whole care pathway, so it could be that the technology itself was very expensive, but if it was very expensive but radically re-engineered a care pathway leading to an overall cost saving, that's absolutely fine in the terms of this methodology. And that methodology can be applied to devices and diagnostics where that sort of value proposition applies. Okay, and I did sort of mention development of evidence and where products do come to market without sufficient clinical utility evidence and despite a sort of a thorough evaluation of the available evidence, there isn't really enough evidence to recommend in routine use, but the committees recognise that there's a lot of potential. They can come up with research recommendations, and we do have this facility to help address that sort of research through facilitating research, and I can sort of talk about that in more detail if anybody wants to talk to me later. Okay, and NICE Medical Technologies guidance, it does sort of hit the press every now and again, and I think it's definitely fair to say that where technologies do get positive guidance from NICE, it's a very, very big help to its adoption. And of course, even though the NHS in England is only one market and probably not the most important market in the world for every company, NICE guidance is looked at and taken notice of way beyond the jurisdiction of the NHS in England. And I've certainly had conversations with a number of companies where decisions in all sorts of geographies have been based on NICE guidance, even though the formal jurisdiction is only the NHS in England. Okay, I wanted to quickly move on to NICE scientific advice. Now, nice scientific advice is not for profit, so we absolutely don't make a profit on this, and are not allowed to make a profit on this. But unfortunately, we do have to charge for nice scientific advice because there's no taxpayers' money that goes into this. So this has to be a self-funding stream. And the whole idea of nice scientific advice is to help companies developing products to generate the sort of information that's going to be needed for a nice evaluation. But of course, that same information is also going to be very, very valuable in discussions with any other sort of payer organisations or HTA agencies or commissioners. And it's all about sort of increasing the robustness of the evidence and speeding up access to patients. And it does that by, reducing sort of uncertainty. Now, we've been offering scientific advice since 2009, so it's a reasonably well established. And we have what we call our standard process, which is how it all started in 2009. But increasingly, we're doing sort of joint scientific advice with regulatory agencies as well, and with other European HTA agencies through the sort of UNETA initiative. And in addition to all those products, which are really focused on sort of giving specific advice on specific products, we also have educational seminars, and we've got different versions for pharmaceuticals and for medical technologies. And I'll say a little bit more about those in a moment. Now, this is just a very sort of brief overview of what our standard advice project looks like. So it starts off with signing a contract, the company submitting a synopsis of the project. They then submit a briefing book, which would talk about all of the sort of development plans, what's already been done, what the plans are moving forward for sort of further evidence generation, and a whole range of specific questions for NICE. And then we provide a very, very, we start working on very, very detailed response to all of those sort of issues. And then there's a face-to-face meeting where companies, along with the experts that we've recruited, so we always recruit, leading clinicians and leading health economists in the sort of areas of the project. And then there's an opportunity for them to have a very detailed meeting with the clients, and then eventually there's an advice report that comes out, which again is a very, very detailed report, which we're told companies find extremely useful. So that's just in an outline of what the sort of process looks like. And I just wanted to sort of finish on some of our developments around medical technologies. And I have to be completely honest and start off by saying, to date, the vast majority of our scientific advice has been for companies developing pharmaceuticals. So that's out there. I've said that. That's the truth. But we have also applied our standard process very successfully to some sort of diagnostic topics as well. So we have had some sort of diagnostics projects as well. I guess the main product we've had so far in the medtech space has really been the educational seminar, and that has gone down very well. We've had a lot of demand for that, so we sort of run those pretty much, as demand comes along. So if people, if there's a reasonable number of people want a medtech seminar, we'll run one, and we also run these seminars all over the place as well. So and if there was enough interest in Sweden, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to run a medtech seminar in Sweden. But what we're currently working on is we're putting a lot of focus at the moment into developing our sort of our product specific advice for the medtech sector, and we're really trying to focus on the needs of medtech developers, including SMEs. I mean, what one issue is that our current standard process is very, very detailed, and even though we're not making a profit, it still costs quite a lot of money. So we're trying to find a slightly slimmer version that might be more consistent with the medtech industry, and certainly with the sort of finances of SMEs. So that's all very, very active at the moment. So again, if anybody's got sort of areas where they think nice specific advice on those products would be useful, and we'd be quite interested in perhaps using some of these as pilots of the new sort of slimmer medtech sort of version of our scientific advice. So by all means, let us know. And then finally, that's just hopefully you'll be getting these slides. Yeah. So I've just put some contact information for the NICE scientific advice people at NICE. Okay. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Nick. That's impressive. You talk so fast. It's just I wouldn't know
Not
you.
too fast, I hope.
No, it's okay. So one thing is that you make the recommendations, but do you follow it up as well and see which one is not taking it in and stuff like that? Like if the hospital is not taking the new technology in, do they get punished or how is it working?
Well, we don't actually have a punishment team within NICE. But perhaps that's a development we should think about. Yeah. We do have. We have this health technology adoption program, which is really really trying to help sort of make sure that people are taking notice of the guidance. But also, whenever we implement some guidance, it goes along with a whole load of implementation support tools. So there's audit tools that can be applied, and we do have an uptake team where they sort of do review guidance and the level of uptake. But perhaps something that's probably even more important is that one of the other responsibilities of NICE that I didn't mention earlier is the development of quality standards. And these quality standards are really built on the guidance that NICE has issued in a subject. So everything from the clinical guidelines, but all the way through to advice on specific technologies, like you would get in the medical technologies and the diagnostics programs. And these quality standards are then used to sort of audit the hospitals and NHS trusts. That's actually quite a powerful mechanism for making sure that sort of NICE guidance is really sort of built into standard clinical practice.
So can the patient actually look what hospital is taking up new technology? Is it open for the public?
Well, I mean, there's nothing NICE does is transparent to the public. So everything we do is fully open. So I mean, quite often, the sort of real pressure on trusts for action is that they've seen some NICE guidance, think it's really relevant. They want those recommendations to be applied to them, and sort of patient groups are quite a powerful force in making sure that some technologies are adopted.
Yeah, impressive. So questions from the audience?
Hi, Anna Fransén from the Swedish Medical Product Agency. How many advice do you have per year, and also together with the MHRA? Is it a popular? How many companies do come to you?
Right. Well, I'm trying to think of the numbers. I mean, we've done sort of, we've done sort of, I think it's about 150 or so, something like that so far. And some, most of the advice has been what we call our standard products, and they're very involved and very detailed. So they're quite big pieces of work. So we could probably only, with the current resources, we could probably only manage, I don't know, 10 or 12 of those a year. And we are seeing a lot of uptake of the joint advice with the EMA. So a lot of companies are coming to ask for EMA plus NICE plus perhaps one or two more HTA agencies. So we're doing more and more of that. With the MHRA specifically, we think the most likely route for joint advice with them is probably linked into a new scheme in the UK called the Early Access to Medicine Scheme. So we're expecting we'll probably be doing more joint advice with the MHRA because of that initiative.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question? Okay, we move on. Thanks a lot, Nick.